Blizzard recently gave us a glimpse into what they have planned for Diablo 4's Endgame. Now, there are some good ideas, and then there are some that I think will need a little bit more tuning to really make an impact in the ARPG market today. So, let's get things kicked off with a classic, and that's World Tiers. So after finishing the campaign, you'll gain access to a capstone dungeon, which you need to complete. After you complete that, you're going to gain access to your first world tier. Then you complete the next capstone dungeon, and the next world tier will unlock, and so on and so forth. Now these world tiers will unlock new features and item rarities for you to discover. For instance, at world tier 3, you'll start seeing unique items. Then at world tier 5, you'll start seeing sacred and ancestral items. Now for me, I think world tiers are a good start. They give players a sense of progression and milestones to work towards. Busy parents and college students can feel like no matter how little time they're playing the game, they're still making progress. They're working towards that next world tier and unlocking something. While hardcore players have something that makes them feel like they're hitting checkpoints and racing towards endgame systems. So for me, this is an entry into endgame that every single player is going to experience, whether they're casual or they're hardcore. And this is something that they're going to interact with. So by making the barrier to entry incredibly low, they're allowing more people to get started on endgame without feeling like they need to have a large bank of knowledge or a supercharged build. It's definitely a gateway to keep people playing without asking too much of them. Now, to me, this speaks volumes to the way they want to handle Diablo 4 and make it stand out against other action RPGs that are on the market today. So from what we're going to cover in this video, this is an everyman's ARPG, one that anyone can enjoy, which I do think is a good thing. Now outside of world tiers, we also have something called nightmare dungeons. So each world tier is going to unlock new nightmare dungeons, which are special variants of regular dungeons that have the difficulty cranked up, but so are the rewards. Now these special dungeons will have affixes to make life more difficult on the players, naturally, but they're also going to require additional objectives to complete. Now in order to get into a nightmare dungeon, you need a key called a sigil. These can be crafted at the occultist, and not all sigils are created equal. Instead, certain sigils will unlock certain groups of nightmare dungeons. So you'll need to visit the correct dungeon to take on the nightmare version of it. Now the example they gave of an affix is called Hellgate. These are portals that'll appear randomly and pull in various enemy types into the battle. So you might be in fighting demons and suddenly you see all these goatmen appear. While I don't really think this is going to move the needle too much, it's still nice to see a different variety of enemies suddenly appear that bring different abilities and different traits to the table. Now, dungeons in Diablo 4 beta felt incredibly medium. They were not great, they were not horrible, they were nothing to write home about. But they did give players something to look forward to, something to discover and something to complete in exchange for rewards like loot and legendary aspects. Now, having nightmare variants of these dungeons sounds interesting, and I do applaud them for giving players a way to rerun these instances for better loot, and a reason for the developers to recycle content to extend the progression table. Now, I'm not overly sold on how fun or engaging these will be. If nightmare dungeons don't provide a little more complexity or variety towards endgame, then this entire system may not be as big a hit as they're hoping. Now, I'm withholding judgment until we get in there, but I'm just voicing my concerns. Outside of nightmare dungeons, we also have something called Helltides. So Helltides are areas of the world that have been corrupted by hell and have attracted more powerful enemies, along with environmental threats. For instance, they mentioned a Helltide area with powerful demons to fight, all while being bombarded by meteors that you need to avoid. And then as you go about and you slay these supercharged enemies, they're going to drop a currency that can be used to open special chests that are littered throughout the Helltide region. So for me, how do I kind of feel about this one? Well, it all kind of goes back to when I first started Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning, and I came across a public quest for the very first time. I was both surprised and impressed by how well it worked. It added a little bit of random chaos into my day, and it gave me something to kind of keep an eye out for. Instead of just zoning out doing quest chains, I needed to stay alert. Helltides reminds me a lot of this. There's a lot of potential here to do some really, really cool stuff to keep players on their toes. And because these Helltides might be pulling players away from something they're doing, the rewards need to be worth the effort. From what they're describing right now, this system does seem pretty basic for an online game these days. I mean, having an area where enemies are stronger and certain conditions are applied is a novel idea for 2006, but not for 2023. So just like Nightmare Dungeons, I'll withhold judgment, but there doesn't seem to be enough meat on the bone here to really make it interesting from what they're describing. Hopefully there's a lot more to it once we get in there. So we have Helltides, we have Nightmare Dungeons, and we have World Tiers. The next thing we're going to talk about are the Whispers of the Dead. This system is going to serve players bounties that they need to go complete. And as you complete these, you're going to collect rewards and items to return to the tree. Upon turning these items into the Tree of Whispers, you'll be presented with a few mystery prizes to choose from. Here we can see a one-handed weapon, boots, and then gauntlets to pick from. These are the same coffers that toss out a few pieces of loot once you open them from your inventory. We saw these in Diablo 4 beta. So my take on this one, as someone who used to spend hours and hours listening to music and grinding bounties across a variety of games, I'm okay with a simple system like this. Get a task, complete a task, get a reward. It's a simple loop that seems like it should be quick. It offers players who may be short on time to still make progress. Bounties are a simple, effective system that should be added to complement other in-game systems, not be a primary one. So as long as the other in-game systems pull through and add depth and complexity, Whispers of the Dead is fine by me. So let's talk about PvP really quick. So Diablo 4 will offer PvP players an end-game system, an end-game area that they can go and basically murder each other in. They're called Fields of Hatred, and they're areas located in the world where you can fight other players and collect unique currency known as shards that need to be purified before you can use them. Now, in order to do this, you need to take them to an altar and perform a ritual. Doing all of this while fending off players who are notified that you're attempting to purify shards. To me, this is very similar to the Dark Zone in Division, where you go and collect loot and you need to extract it before you can use it. It's the same concept. Now, once you make it out with your shards, you can visit a town and chat with a vendor to then purchase cosmetic items and rewards. So my take on this one, like I mentioned earlier, this works like the Dark Zone in the Division. It's immediately what I thought of. As someone who isn't a huge PvP-oriented person outside of like arena shooters, I really like the idea of these areas. Let me explore, collect, take some risks, have a heart-thumping experience trying to purify some shards. It sounds like a really good loop and something that I would be a fan of. Where I can see this going off the rails is in the cosmetics. If this is a primary source for cosmetic gear that players feel as being gated behind competitive content, there's going to be an uproar. But if there are ways for players to earn unique cosmetic gear in both PvE and PvP content, I think the opposite happens, and this becomes a sort of a symbol of badassery of you're that individual, you're that player that went in and managed to get all these shards and collect enough to then purchase this cosmetic item. So they need to be careful with this, but it's one thing that I think will be popular, and I think PvP players will really enjoy it. So we have one last system to talk about in terms of endgame, and it's a progression system. And this is one that I think has a lot of mystery still surrounding it, and a lot of people are placing a ton of weight on this system to sort of fill in the build complexity, build depth gap that we saw in Diablo 4's beta. That was one of the things. Everything seemed so simple in the Diablo 4 beta when we were level 25. But a lot of players, including myself, are thinking, well, with Paragon Boards, we should have a level of depth that gets added to our character. So let's talk about what Paragon Boards are. So as you reach level cap, you're going to gain access to the Paragon system, which gives players a plethora of nodes that grant variety of different stat bonuses. You have small nodes that grant minor stat bonuses like +5. You have larger nodes that give new passive effects or large stat boosts. And as you near the edge of a Paragon board, you'll be able to choose the next board that you want to snap onto your existing one. And you can even rotate these to make sure you're starting at the best spot to reach the node that you're after. So from what we know so far, each level will net you 4 Paragon points, resulting in a grand total of 200 Paragon points before you are maxed out. So unlike Diablo 3, Paragon points will be capped in Diablo 4. So let's talk about the different types of tiles you're going to see in Paragon boards. One, you're going to see normal tiles. These are your basic white tiles that provide small bonuses like we mentioned earlier. These are those +5 to stats. Magic tiles are similar to normal tiles, but they're going to provide larger bonuses for the player, +20, +15. Then you have rare tiles. These are going to provide large boosts of power and will provide additional benefits once the player reaches a certain attribute threshold. There are 6 of these per board, and they're usually something you want to prioritize. Then we have legendary tiles. These are found at the center of the board, and these are going to provide a new legendary power for you to unlock. But tiles aren't the only thing that's on Paragon boards that'll provide a big boost to power. You'll also come across glyph sockets. Now, glyphs are dropped items that you can then socket into your Paragon board that'll provide bonuses to any tiles within their radius. So if you look at this screenshot, for instance, you can see in the right corner, this player has a glyph equipped that's affecting a number of tiles around it. Now, we don't know exactly what this glyph does, but we do have some examples of what magic and rare glyphs can do. And the other thing is, glyphs aren't static. You can level them up to extend their reach to affect more tiles. And lastly, you might be wondering, are they going to use the exact same Paragon boards over and over every single season? And no. Blizzard has confirmed they will be adding new boards over time to help keep things fresh and provide new ways for players to spend Paragon points. So how do I feel about the Paragon system from what we know so far? I'm really kind of conflicted on it. I'm going to wait to see how it works because on one hand, I really like the amount of progress that's laid out before you as like a newly capped player, sort of like a new frontier. It feels like you have a lot of choice and you have a lot of variety to really like make your character stand apart from all the other characters in the world. But on the other hand, you're staring down the barrel of a ton of small +5 bonuses with some larger worthwhile nodes sort of like peppered across each board. And if you removed all of these small minor nodes, the +5 ones, and just consolidated them into single +30 nodes instead, you would be left with a much smaller and much like less impressive board. And it wouldn't be as visually stunning in terms of potential build variety either. But the same could be said of Path of Exile. So for me, it's not about the small nodes, it's about the journey to the larger ones. Now, I like to make incremental progress, and I like to feel like each level I'm getting closer and closer to that target legendary aspect or that rare tile that I've been after. And remember, each level gets you 4 points, so you're not going to be stuck with a single +5 node when you level up. You'll be able to get at least +20 worth of stat boosts or one of those larger nodes per level. So it's going to be worth your time. It's not necessarily going to feel like each level is going to be a waste until you manage to finally turtle your way all the way up to a large tile. So I hope that makes sense. I mean, I like what they're trying to provide here, but until we see some more examples of boards and we really get our hands on this thing, I can't say one way or another if this system is going to flop or be a worthwhile system that's going to make Endgame something that you want to actually participate in. So what comes next, right? We have all this Endgame stuff, but in the current industry, live service games are the thing. Getting updates, things coming down the pike. There's always something new that's happening. How is Diablo 4 going to stick with that? After the game has gone live, they plan to continue adding content and more systems for players to enjoy. We heard about seasons, they're going to add new gear, Paragon boards, features, additional systems, perhaps even DLC that'll expand the world. At this point, I'm hoping we just have a decent launch and that Blizzard has seasons with a lot of content for players to chew through. Path of Exile has set the standard in terms of content per league. Hopefully Diablo 4 can match or exceed that. But that wraps this video up, guys. That is everything we know so far about Endgame. What do you all think? Is this something that you want to participate in? Are there massive holes in this Endgame plan? Let's talk about it in the comment section below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.